Comanche healer arrived to see him cheating, but his children and horse chose her instead. The air tasted of betrayal, acrid and metallic, long before Ayanna saw the shadows tangled in the fading light. It clung to her, a premonition heavier than the leather pouch of herbs at her hip, a weight colder than the wind whispering through the barren scrubland. She had ridden for days, a solitary silhouette against the vast, unforgiving plains, drawn by an ache in her spirit that no poultice or ancient chant could soothe. Her journey had been one of desperate hope, a pilgrimage back to the man she had called her own, the father of her children, Elias. He was a man carved from the harsh landscape they shared, resilient and proud, yet always carrying an unquiet flicker in his eyes, a restless spirit she had long tried to anchor. Ayanna, the Comanche healer, had mended broken bones and shattered spirits for her people, coaxed life from dying bodies with whispers and herbs passed down through generations. But her own heart had always remained a fragile, untended wound. Today, it felt as though the wound was about to burst wide open, bleeding out under the indifferent gaze of the setting sun. Her horse, a sturdy Mustang named Shadow, usually a creature of calm, pricked its ears with an uncommon agitation, its hooves kicking up dust that swirled like tormented spirits. Ayanna felt the tremor in its powerful frame, a silent echo of the seismic shift occurring within her own soul. This was not the reunion she had envisioned during the long, lonely nights under a blanket of stars. This was not the embrace of shared memories, the quiet strength of two souls rejoined. This was an arrival, not a homecoming, an unveiling of a truth too ugly to name. The scent of wood smoke, usually comforting, now carried a faint, alien sweetness, a perfume not of her own making, not of Elias's. It was a sign, a grotesque beacon, signaling the end of an era, the crumbling of a foundation built on promises now revealed as dust. She tightened her grip on Shadow's reins, her knuckles white, her gaze fixed on the distant outline of their cabin, a structure that once symbolized sanctuary, now a looming silhouette of deceit. Every beat of Shadow's hooves against the earth was a drumbeat of dread, leading her closer to an inevitable shattering truth. The world seemed to hold its breath, the very air thick with unspoken accusation, preparing her for the moment the veil would finally rip apart, exposing the raw, bleeding wound beneath. She was a healer, yes, but some wounds, she knew, were beyond any earthly remedy, searing into the very fabric of one's being. The cabin, humble and familiar, appeared suddenly through a break in the cottonwood trees, its single lamp a beacon of false warmth. Ayanna dismounted, her movements precise, almost ritualistic, a desperate attempt to impose order on the chaos swirling inside her. Shadow whickered softly, nudging her shoulder, a silent plea for her to turn back, to flee the impending desolation. But Ayanna could not. Her feet, seemingly guided by an invisible force, carried her closer, each step a deliberate denial of the scream that threatened to tear from her throat. Through the flickering light of the window, she saw them. Elias, his broad back to her, silhouetted against the hearth, and a woman. Not just any woman, but Sarah, a settler from the trading post, her laugh, bright and carefree, piercing the evening silence. Sarah, with her pale skin and hair like spun moonlight, a stark contrast to Ayanna's sun-kissed copper hues. Ayanna felt a familiar, visceral jolt of recognition. Elias's hand, resting casually on Sarah's arm, a possessive gesture that stripped Ayanna of breath. It was a scene devoid of passion, yet brimming with an intimacy more devastating than any wild embrace. It was the quiet comfort, the mundane domesticity, that twisted the knife in Ayanna's gut. This was not a moment of weakness, a fleeting lapse in judgment. This was a choice carefully constructed, lived out in the very home they had built together. Elias, the man who had once knelt before her, speaking of an unbreakable bond, now shared the warmth of their hearth with another. The air crackled with unspoken history, with promises broken and dreams shattered. Ayanna's hands instinctively went to her medicine pouch, her fingers closing around a small, smooth riverstone, a talisman against sorrow, but even its cold comfort offered no solace against this searing betrayal. She saw her children then, not in the window, but in her mind's eye. Little Cale, with his father's eyes and her quiet thoughtfulness, and Alara, fierce and bright, a miniature reflection of Ayana's own stubborn spirit. What would this do to them? What ripple of devastation would this act of deceit send through their innocent lives? The thought was a lash, stinging her into action. She moved towards the door, no longer a healer but a warrior, her heart a drum of fury, her mind a cold, calculating storm. The silence of the plains had swallowed her pain, leaving only a hard, unyielding resolve. This was her home, her family, and though Elias might have forgotten the sanctity of these bonds, she had not. The truth, once revealed, had to be faced, no matter how profoundly it scarred. The wooden door creaked, a soft protesting groan that ripped through the false serenity within. Elias looked up, his face, usually a map of strong lines and weathered defiance, suddenly slack with shock. Sarah, startled, pulled her hand away, her eyes wide, like a cornered deer. For a long moment the only sound was the crackle of the fire, consuming wood with a relentless, indifferent hunger. Ayana stood framed in the doorway, the last vestiges of twilight clinging to her, making her appear less a woman and more a force of nature, a vengeful spirit rising from the earth. Her gaze, usually soft and assessing, was now a piercing sapphire blue, cutting through Elias's carefully constructed world. He stammered, a pathetic, broken sound. "Ayana, you're back." His words hung in the air, a flimsy bridge over an abyss of lies. Ayana did not answer. Her eyes swept past him, settling on Sarah, a woman who, in another life, might have been a friend. Now she was merely a symbol of Elias's betrayal, an unwitting accomplice in the destruction of Ayana's world. Sarah, flushed and uncomfortable, rose from the stool, her gaze darting between Ayana's fierce stillness and Elias's bewildered guilt. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, charged with all the unspoken truths that now clamored for release. Ayana's presence filled the small cabin, displacing the air, making it difficult for either of them to breathe. It was a silence born of shattered trust, a chasm that had opened not between three people, but within Elias himself, splitting his loyalties, exposing the hollow core of his convictions. The flicker in his eyes, once merely unquiet, now burned with a desperate, trapped light. He had been caught, not in a web of his own making, but in the raw, inescapable moment of consequence. For Ayana, this moment was not just about the man and the other woman. It was about the erosion of all that she had fought to preserve, the sacred bonds of family, of promise, of heart. She felt the chill of the evening seep into the cabin, mirroring the icy grip of despair that tightened around her own heart. This wasn't merely infidelity, it was a profound rupture, a tearing of the fabric of her very existence. The questions hammered in her mind, rhetorical and searing. How long? Why? What was so lacking in her, in them, that he would seek solace in another's arms? The healer's instinct to mend, to soothe, to understand, fought with a primal urge to shatter, to burn, to obliterate the pain. Elias finally found his voice, a rough, pleading whisper. "Ayana, it's not what it seems." Ayana's lips curled, a fleeting, bitter smile that held no mirth. "And what does it seem, Elias?" Her voice, when it came, was low, a whisper of wind over jagged rocks, yet it cut through the cabin's tension like a sharpened blade. "Does it seem that the hearth you swore to protect warms another? Does it seem that the hands that once held mine now find comfort elsewhere?" Her words were not questions but accusations, each one a hammer blow against the fragile edifice of his excuses. Sarah, unable to bear the weight of the moment, mumbled a hasty apology and slipped past Ayana, vanishing into the darkness of the night, leaving behind only the faint, sweet scent that had first heralded the betrayal. Now, it was just them, two figures locked in a silent battle for the soul of their shattered home. Ayana stepped fully into the cabin, her eyes scanning the familiar space as if seeing it for the first time through a stranger's gaze. The woven rugs she had made, the tools Elias had crafted, the children's drawings tacked to the wall, each item now seemed to mock her, a testament to a life she thought she shared, now revealed as a carefully constructed illusion. A painful flashback flickered through her mind. Elias, younger, vibrant, standing beside her as they built this very cabin, his laugh echoing through the trees, his eyes full of a hopeful future. He had promised her the stars, a home rooted deep in the earth, and a family that would withstand any storm. He had called her his strength, his spirit, his anchor. The memory was a cruel irony, a stark contrast to the hollow man standing before her now, stripped bare by his own deceit. What had changed? What had eroded the foundation of their shared dreams? Had it been the long, hard winters, the scarcity of game, the isolation that pressed down on them from all sides? Or had it been something within Elias himself, a restlessness Ayanna had always sensed but never fully understood, a yearning for a life less challenging, less burdened by the ancient ways she held so dear? She remembered the arguments, sparse but impactful, about his desire for more land, more cattle, a life more akin to the settlers pushing westward, a life she instinctively resisted, bound as she was to the traditions of her ancestors. Perhaps this woman, Sarah, represented that simpler, more conventional path, a path less entwined with the wild spirit of the plains, less demanding of the raw, elemental commitment Ayanna embodied. Elias moved then, taking a hesitant step towards her, his hand outstretched, as if to bridge the chasm his actions had created. Ayanna, please. I was lonely. You were gone so long, tending to the others. The sickness in the north, it took so much of your time. His voice was laced with a desperate plea for understanding, but it resonated with a self-pity that grated against Ayanna's raw nerves. He spoke of her absence, her dedication to her healing duties, as if her commitment to their people was a personal slight against him, rather than a shared necessity. This was the unraveling of the mystery, not a grand revelation, but a bleak, mundane truth. He sought comfort because she was fulfilling her purpose, her calling. It was a profound irony. The healer, whose very essence was to mend, was being torn apart by the selfish desire of the one she sought to keep whole. Ayanna recoiled, her hand instinctively rising to halt his advance. Lonely? Her voice was a low growl, laced with venom. You speak of loneliness when our children breathe your name in their sleep? When the land, this very home, holds the echoes of our shared breath? What of my loneliness, Elias? The solitude of carrying the weight of our people's suffering, of facing death without you by my side. Her words were a torrent, unleashed from a reservoir of unspoken grievances, not just about Sarah, but about the slow, insidious drift that had pulled them apart over the past few seasons. There had been a growing chasm, subtle at first, then widening between her deep reverence for the old ways, for the spirit world and the ancient wisdom, and his increasing fascination with the encroaching settler world, with its fences and its isolated homesteads. He had started to see her healing journeys as absences, her spiritual practices as exotic curiosities, rather than the core of her being. His gaze dropped, unable to meet the intensity of hers, a gesture of defeat more telling than any confession. He was a man caught between two worlds, and in his weakness, he had betrayed the one he had chosen. This was the moment of tension, the quiet storm before the lightning strike. The air vibrated with the unspoken, with the years of sacrifice and understanding that had been so casually discarded. Ayanna felt a profound weariness settle over her, deeper than any physical exhaustion. The true wound was not the infidelity itself, but the revelation of a character she had misjudged, a spirit she had overestimated. Just as the silence threatened to consume them entirely, a small, sleepy whimper broke it. Little Cale, his hair tousled, stood in the doorway of his shared bedroom, rubbing his eyes. Ilara, older and more alert, peeking out from behind him, her gaze sharp and questioning. Their presence, innocent and vulnerable, was a sudden, stark reminder of the larger stakes involved, of the delicate ecosystem of their family now irrevocably disturbed. Ayanna's heart, hardened moments before, softened with a pain more profound than anger. She knelt, extending an arm, and Cale, with the unwavering trust of a child, stumbled into her embrace, burying his face in her buckskin tunic. Ilara, however, remained rooted, her eyes so like her mother's fixed on Elias then on Ayanna, piecing together the fragmented reality with an unsettling clarity. Elias started to speak, a strained explanation forming on his lips, but Ayanna silenced him with a single sharp glance. This truth, whatever its ugly shape, would not be delivered in hushed tones or veiled words in front of their children. The moment was not for him to confess, but for her to protect. The children were the anchor, the undeniable, irrefutable reason that she could not simply walk away and let the plains swallow her grief. They were her reflection, their futures intertwined with her choices. Ilara, ever perceptive, left her brother's side and approached Shadow, who had followed Ayana to the cabin door and now stood sentinel. The horse, usually wary of strangers, lowered its head, nudging Ilara's hand gently. The girl stroked its nose, a quiet communion passing between them, a silent language of understanding that transcended the human turmoil. Shadow's loyalty, absolute and unwavering, had always been a comfort to Ayana, a symbol of the pure, untainted bonds that still existed. Now, its quiet reassurance extended to Ilara, a poignant symbol of the truth that lay beneath the surface. The natural world, in its simplicity, offered a steadfastness that human hearts often failed to uphold. This subtle, powerful interaction spoke volumes, a visual metaphor for the silent judgment being rendered. The horse, a creature of instinct and loyalty, seemed to understand the true nature of the heart, choosing a connection rooted in authenticity over one tainted by deceit. Ayana watched, a pang of bittersweet recognition. The bonds of kin and spirit were deeper than any betrayal. The choice, she realized with a growing clarity, would not be hers alone, nor Elias's, but a collective unfolding, shaped by the very essence of their shared blood and shared spirit, a testament to the resilient, unwritten laws of their ancient people. The next morning dawned with a deceptive calm, the sun painting the horizon in hues of rose and gold, as if attempting to erase the darkness of the preceding night. Yet within the cabin, the tension remained, a palpable weight pressing down on every breath. Elias, haggard and shadowed, tried to engage the children in their usual morning rituals, but his efforts felt hollow, his laughter forced. Kyle, clinging to Ayana's side, cast wary glances at his father, sensing the shift in the delicate balance of their world. Ilara, however, was the true barometer of the storm. Her usual spirited chatter was gone, replaced by a brooding silence. Her eyes, usually sparkling with curiosity, were now dark pools of uncertainty, observing every interaction, every subtle flicker of emotion. She spent the better part of the morning with Shadow, brushing its mane, whispering secrets into its soft ear, finding solace in its unwavering presence. Ayana watched her, a knot of fierce protectiveness tightening in her chest. Ilara, at her young age, already possessed a keen understanding of fractured trusts, a wisdom beyond her years, perhaps inherited from generations of ancestors who had faced betrayal, not just from within, but from the encroaching outside world. It was a difficult truth, but Ayana knew she could not shield her children from the consequences of their father's actions. Instead, she had to prepare them, equip them with the resilience that ran in their blood. The memory of her own mother, a formidable woman who had taught Ayana the ancient ways, teaching her that true strength lay not in avoiding pain, but in moving through it, echoed in her mind. Elias finally approached Ayana, his voice low, earnest. "Ayana, we need to talk. About us. About this." His gesture encompassed the wreckage of their shared life. Ayana met his gaze, her expression unyielding. "There is nothing to talk about, Elias. The words have been spoken by your actions, etched into this very earth." Her refusal to engage in explanations, to offer him the solace of a confessional, was a deliberate choice. There was no argument to be made, no justification that could mend this gaping wound. The impact of her terse statement hung in the air, blunt and final. He had expected a confrontation, a battle of words, but she offered only a stark, unyielding truth. The silence that followed was heavy, laden with the weight of years of unspoken disappointments, of paths diverged and promises broken. The children, drawn by the gravity of the unspoken, hovered near, their small faces reflecting the solemnity of the moment. The decision, Ayana realized, was already being made, not by words, but by the undeniable resonance of spirit. The pivotal moment arrived not with a dramatic pronouncement, but with the subtle yet undeniable choice of small hands and a loyal heart. Ayana prepared to leave, not in anger, but with a quiet, resolute sadness that settled deep within her bones. She began to pack her medicine pouch, her movements slow and deliberate, a ritual of detachment. Kyle, watching her, his lower lip trembling, finally broke the silence. "Mama, where are you going?" His voice was a fragile thread, threatening to unravel her composure. Ayanna knelt, pulling him close, inhaling the scent of his hair, a scent that was inextricably linked to Elias, a bittersweet reminder of their shared past. "I must go, little one. The spirits call me and the people need me." It was a truth, a partial one, a softened blow, but Elias, standing by the hearth, watched the scene unfold with a growing sense of dread. He knew instinctively that this departure was not just a journey, but a profound severing. As Ayanna stood to leave, her hand on the latch of the door, Elias finally found his voice, a desperate, raw plea. "Ayanna, don't go. Please, stay. We can fix this for the children." His words were a last, desperate grasp at a future he had already shattered. But it was Ilara who made the unspoken decision manifest. Without a word, she walked to Shadow, who stood patiently outside the cabin, its gaze fixed on Ayanna. She climbed onto the horse's back, her small frame surprisingly steady. Then she reached down, her hand outstretched to Kale. "Come, Kale. We go with Mama." Her voice was clear, unwavering, echoing with an ancient resolve. Giel, without a moment's hesitation, looked from his father's pleading face to his sister's determined eyes, then back to Ayanna, and then slowly, deliberately, he walked to Shadow. With a boost from his sister, he scrambled up behind her, wrapping his small arms around her waist. It was a tableau of profound irony. The children, meant to be the anchors of Elias's life, chose the path of the one he had betrayed. The horse, a creature of unwavering loyalty, affirmed their choice, its powerful frame accepting their presence as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Elias stood frozen, his face a mask of disbelief and crushing realization. The silence that followed was heavier than any words, a testament to the ultimate painful truth. The children, in their pure, unadulterated instinct, had chosen what was authentic, what felt safe, what resonated with a love unbroken. They chose the healer, the one who carried the spirit of their people, the one whose heart, though wounded, remained whole in its purpose. Ayanna looked at Elias, her eyes devoid of anger, filled instead with a deep, sorrowful understanding. His face was a ruin, stripped bare of all pretense, revealing the hollow core of his regret. The man she had loved, the man who had shared her bed and her dreams, stood utterly broken not by her words, but by the undeniable, instinctive choice of his own children, mirrored by the silent fidelity of the horse he had once ridden so proudly. There was no triumph in her heart, only a profound ache for what had been lost, for the irreparable damage to a bond she had believed sacred. The image of Kale and Ilara perched on Shadow's back, their small faces resolute, was a stark, powerful symbol of where true loyalty lay. It was a choice born not of malice, but of the deep, intuitive understanding that children often possess, a primal recognition of genuine care and stability. Shadow, sensing Ayanna's readiness, shifted its weight, a soft rumble in its chest. Ayanna turned away from Elias, her gaze sweeping over the cabin one last time, a farewell to a life that would now exist only in the archives of memory. She did not speak, for there were no words left to bridge the chasm that had opened between them. The lessons of her people, of the cycles of nature, of the relentless march of time, whispered in her spirit. Sometimes things must break completely for new growth to emerge. Sometimes the cutting away of dead wood is necessary for the tree to truly flourish. This was not a moment of revenge, but of liberation, painful and necessary. As she stepped outside, the cool morning air brushed against her face, a cleansing breath. The land stretched before her, vast and indifferent, yet also a source of endless comfort. It was the same land that had nurtured her ancestors, the same land that would bear witness to her healing journeys. Her children, her blood, her spirit rode with her now, united not by a man's broken promises but by the deeper, more ancient bonds of resilience and heritage. The bitterness in her heart began to recede, replaced by a quiet, determined strength. The healer, broken, would mend herself and in doing so would rise, stronger and truer to her own unwavering spirit. The path away from the cabin was not one of flight, but of reclamation. Ayanna, with Kale nestled securely in front of Ilara on Shadow's back, rode eastward, towards the rising sun, towards the ancestral lands where the spirits of her people whispered in the wind. The silence that had weighed so heavily on the cabin now transformed into a peaceful communion, broken only by the rhythmic thud of Shadow's hooves and the soft murmurs of the children. Elias, a solitary figure shrinking in the distance, was already a fading image, a chapter closing, its ending painful but necessary. For Ayanna, the act of leaving was not an admission of defeat, but a powerful affirmation of her own worth, her own strength, and the undeniable truth of her calling. She was a healer not just of bodies but of spirits, and in healing herself and safeguarding her children's hearts, she was fulfilling her most profound duty. The sting of betrayal lingered, a phantom ache, but it was overshadowed by a burgeoning sense of peace, a quiet resolve that settled deep within her. The road ahead was long, fraught with the challenges of forging a new path, but she carried with her the unwavering loyalty of her children, their eyes reflecting her own fierce spirit. They were her purpose, her unwavering anchor in a world of shifting sands. The horse, Shadow, a silent, powerful ally, carried them forward, a testament to the unspoken bonds of love and loyalty that transcended human flaws. Its steady gait was a rhythm of renewal, a heartbeat of hope. As they rode, Ayanna began to hum an old Comanche song, a lullaby of endurance and rebirth, its melody weaving into the fabric of the morning, carrying her grief and transforming it into a quiet strength. The land unfolded before them, vast and wild, a canvas for new beginnings. The sun climbed higher, warming her face, a promise of light after the long night. The emotional tone shifted, subtly yet profoundly, from the deep, dark ache of betrayal to a quiet, profound hope. Ayanna, the healer, had lost a part of her life, but she had rediscovered the unwavering core of her being. She was not just a woman, she was a legacy, a keeper of ancient wisdom, and a mother whose children had chosen the truth of her spirit over the illusion of a broken home. The future was not without its shadows, but it was illuminated by the fierce, unwavering light of her own resilience, a journey towards a hopeful resolution, a new dawn on the limitless plains.